Hello to everybody. Thank you to be here to hear me. I'm a tour guide, as Danny and Mara told you. I'm Florentine, born in Florence, lived most of my life here. And I have a background as an historian of architecture and architect also, a professional. And I always was very interested to Judaism, Jewish history. And when I decided now, 25 years ago, it's impressive, that I wanted to become a guide also, and then stop to make the profession as an architect, I really focus all my research and work about Jewish history of Florence, trying to find more material to talk about. Personally, I have a Catholic origin. I'm not Jewish myself. I study, I made a GU to an Orthodox conversion, but study a lot, I went to Israel many times, etc. When the rabbi considered me ready for the conversion, I told them, rega, in the sense that I told honestly, it's a little too difficult for me to be so strict, so observant. So I frequent the community, I do my volunteer work, I go to the services, but I haven't finished technically the conversion process. So I cannot say I'm Jewish. Anyway, I want to start explaining you Florence history because, okay, we're not talking about the great numbers of Roma or for the past, etc., not even the actual great community in Milan, but Florence history is definitely amazing. Totally different from any other city, even from the close city to Florence like Siena and Pisa. So I wanted to start it. May I share the, can I share that?
Yes, please go right ahead. We'll share your screen.
Okay. So this is a wonderful photograph that I personally didn't do. It's a great photograph where we see the two domes, a very impressive dome in Florence. The one on the background is the famous dome by the architect Brunelleschi, 1400. It's the dome of the biggest church in Florence and second in Italy after St. Peter, the Duomo of Florence, St. Peter in Rome, I mean. And that is the unbelievable, enormous, because that is what is made, enormous synagogue of Florence built on late 1800. That was designed for a community of little less than 2,000 people. So the importance, which is amazing studying the history of this, was not to build an enormous synagogue because there was an enormous quantity of Jews, but because the proudness of being finally emancipated with the unification of the country in 1861, and to be part of the national government, of the national army, whatever you want to explain, you can understand that was a great moment. They decided to build the biggest possible synagogue they could do with the money that they had. That had to be grandiose, it had to be enormous. And the thing which is amazing, better, are you talking about? Sorry, I tried to go back up. Sorry.
Hey,
and these are
just to interrupt, we have a couple comments about the sound quality. I wonder, are you able to put the both headphones in your ear just to see if that works a little bit better? And then on the bottom left of the Zoom, where you would usually mute yourself, there's a little arrow, and just make sure that the microphone
is on. The microphone is on. Listen, I turn it off and turn it on. I mean, the microphone is on, but
just want to make sure that the microphone is on your headphones and not on the computer. And also, if people want to turn off their cameras, It might enhance the quality of the audio a little bit better, depending on your Wi-Fi. And last but not least, at the bottom of everyone's screen, if you go to CC, show captions, and you click on that, you can then see the English captions coming up. So when Giovanna speaks, you can be reading it as well. So let's give that a shot, everybody. And thanks for everyone for understanding that we don't, we try to do the best we can with the technical advances of today. Everyone is saying that it's sounding much better now. So go for it, Giovanna. Thank you so much. We'll unmute you. And you're still muted, so we got to unmute you, Giovanna. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can, yes. We got a thumbs up from Mara, so we're in good shape. Thank you so much.
You. So you can see on the screen what is written there. So the classic question that are coming when you visit a new city and you want to know what happened in the city when Jews arrive. I mean, when the Jews settle in Florence, because that is interesting, quite late compared other cities in Italy, which doesn't mean that there weren't Jews before. But it's amazing because when we talk about Florence, the very important city that now everybody wants to visit, became so important on 1200. So why only late? 1437, we know that the group of Jews established in the city. We don't have document before this date of resident Jews. So surely they were, came back, go, etc., but none really being citizen is not a good word. I mean, resident in the city. But that, it's a date which is important for us, 1437, when the Republic of Florence, and at the time in the Republic of Florence, the most important people were the Medici family, merchant and banker of the Pope. So very important. Never the wealthiest, but those that had the best connection with the most powerful people in Europe, especially the King of France. And what happened? 1437, a group of Jews, the Jewish pawnbroker. So I'm not talking about banker, but pawnbrokers, those who had pawn shop and they lent money in exchange of a pawn. And that was an interesting thing. Why in Florence? What happened? All over Italy since 1200, 1300, it was a great problem. Lending money within interest was always a terrible thing. Because, I mean, that's for Christian, any other Christian word, brother, and etc. So going back to the Torah, which is part of the so-called Old Testament, Old Torah and Tanakh, it was not a good thing, it was a terrible thing to get an interest when money was lended to some other Christian. But this was a work that every Christian did, included monks, included bishops, well, whoever had an extra quantity of cash money, lent the money and made a terrible business on it. The Franciscan and the Dominica since 1200 started to make this problem like the plague of their importance for the mass of people. Let's think about 90% of population to get cash money that at the time was mandatory to survive for the economy, etc. in case of need or whatever. Without cash money, it was impossible to do anything. And how they could get it? From Christians, because what happened? There were only Christians doing that, depending on the city. But Christian church, a terrible high interest, higher and higher, because they were part of the government in Florence. The pawnbroker were with a banker having an enormous power in politics, obviously. And so what happened? That the church tried to moralize this kind of problem, trying to convince for a long time the authority to open a public pawn shop. But this never worked because Never authority had enough money to invest in such a risky business. It happened only later, late 1400, talking about Florence, 1500, 1600. Up to them, what the church did. The church pushed more and more a button that was concerning going back to the Torah. When something had to be very, very important, even for Christians, go back to the Torah, where it's written, don't lend money with interest to your brother and sister. At that point in time, city by city, in different regions, they started to invite Jews to replace the Christian in this activity. And in Florence, they were officially established in the city after having signed the document that's still on in our city archive in 1437, a document that officially gave permission to 3 Jewish pawnbrokers of ancient Roman origin to establish in the city. And they were allowed to put their activity in the ancient pawn shop left by the Christian. They had to leave that activity in their hands, which was the great convenience for the government. The great convenience that Jews never had the same rights of Christians. So that it was possible to impose to them much easily than to the Christian a top. They could not hire in Florence, sometimes more, nothing more than 50% of interest, sometimes 20% of interest in their business. When Christians sometimes arrive to 30%, 40%, 50%, don't even think about the actual rate of interest, forget it. And when I say that the first Jews that established in Florence, and I'm talking about Florence, forget Italian history that doesn't exist, because Italian history, when we talk about Italian history, we end at the time of the end of the imperial Roman time. Up to then, for many centuries, Roma was the capital of the Italian land, if you want, that ruled all the Western world and all Mediterranean area coast. I mean, okay, Egypt and this and that. But after that, Italy was the land of the invaders, and then barbarian and this and that. So Italian history is no more even a logical word to use. You have to study local Italian history, city by city, land by land, then state by state. And by consequence, Jewish history can only be strictly local Jewish history. In the same state, in the same region today, which is Tuscany, where Florence is capital since mid of, let's say, late 1550. So 1559, Florence became capital of Tuscany, quite a large region, not the same dimension of today, because Pisa and Siena, both the main other cities in Tuscany, were submitted to Florence by war, and etc., etc. At that point, we can talk about Tuscany. Up to them, each city was independent Republican government for a long time and fighting with each other, because like always, like a condominium, they were trying to have advantage one city on the other one, over the other one. But when we talk about Venice, it's totally different history. When you talk about Rome, another story. Even small villages around Florence had different history than Florence itself. And so by consequence, different Jewish history. Then we can ask, but where the Jews that established in Florence, I'm talking about 1437, were coming from? It doesn't matter where at that moment they were coming from, but their origin was ancient Roman origin, when Jews in Rome or Alexandria of Egypt were really thousands of people, especially in Rome. That at the glorious time of the beginning of the imperial time, when Rome counted 1 million of inhabitants, Jews were coming from Israel, having business there, coming back by regular ships transportation. And they were free people. They were enslaved at all up to 70, when after Titus and all the disasters. But up to then, Jews were documented staying in Rome and living in Rome since about 200 years before the diaspora. Okay, so then they arrive as slaves. But it's very important to think that the Rome Act, even actually, the Roman Jewish community still today count 13,000 of members, and which is quite a huge number in Italy. They have origins since they are still considered the oldest Jewish group of people living on the same area since more than 2,200 years out of Israel. It's the only this community. And obviously they were moving from a city to another one, maintaining the link and this and that. When you look the single feminine name from 1400 and 1500, Jews had their original Jewish name and very often adopted city name, not obliged, but simply just to understand, when they wanted to sign a contract with a notary, what's your name? Ismael ben Ezekiel ben Isaac. Okay, where are you coming from? Creative, from yesterday. Where are you coming from? Siena, just yet. Okay, Ismael da Siena, Ismael da Rieti. So there are lots of Jews that have this kind of name, like Leonardo da Vinci, and those names were easy. When you look, unfortunately, where we look the list of the Shoah victims in Florence, for instance, I can tell you who was Sephardi, who was Italian, and where and from. Let's say later, 1492, obviously we had a boom of Sephardim, obviously, and also Levantine later, and Ashkenazi. But if you want to look Ashkenazi present, the first huge present was in Venice. You don't have to forget geography in all this. The trade. We know that during different periods, they could be pawnbroker, then sometimes was prohibited for them to be pawnbroker because the different authority opened public pawn shop. Public pawn shop means with lower interest to pay. They were medical doctor. One of the activity that was allowed to Jews since a long time, definitely from 1400 from Padua, the University of Padua allowed Jews to be professional medical doctor. The only thing they could not do was to dissect corpses. It was a famous letter written by a Jewish doctor, student of medicine, asking the rabbi, "Can I dissect?" No, you can't. But you can look how the other do. I mean, learn this way. And that obviously depending on the different situation that we are talking about, Florence, the relationship the last 20 years with the local governments and the religious authorities, how was in Florence? Not the worst of Italy, definitely. It was quite good. With the Medici, when the Medici needed them, were lovely. So 1437, to resolve this terrible problem of Christian lending money, welcome the Jews. And the Jews could have a nice period, not all time. But sometimes, okay, the Medici, when they started to have the Pope, the ghetto in Rome and other cities, etc., the Medici weren't interested because good business with the wealthy Sephardi. And so, no, we don't want to have a ghetto in Florence. And then, yes, we want to have. So 1570, a ghetto was set up in Florence. But the situation changed century by century. And now I wanted to show you this image, contemporary image of the city, because it's amazing how to check, how this building, just a moment. You can see the huge dome of the Duomo of Florence, eccolo qua. eccolo qua. The huge dome of this complex, the dome, the bell tower, etc. This was existing. It was almost finished to be built when the first group established. Definitely, it was already existing in Florence, the seat of government of Florence, actually City Hall. It wasn't existing at that time. The famous Uffizi, which is the art gallery, the famous painting gallery of the city. And definitely it wasn't existing at all, the synagogue of Florence that was built late 1800. But Santa Croce Church without the facade was already existing. You can see in the yellow circle, the synagogue today. Obviously it's a fake perspective because it's from a drone and very high. And it's difficult to believe that this dome, the dome of the synagogue, is the third highest dome in the city. But believe me, that's it. Aspetta. Here you see the river. The river, very, very important Florence history, because that river is connecting the city since ever to the Mediterranean Sea. And it's flew toward this direction from east to west and passing through Pisa and arriving to the coast. Pisa was a marine republic, talking about the 1200, 1000, 1100, 1200. Pisa became probably the most important city of this Tuscan land because to defend the coast against the Muslim invaders, they created in Pisa a marine republic. So even the city of Florence contributed to help economically, etc. But a great fight, continuous fight, which is terrible, still existing now just as a joke, between Florence against Pisa was due to the fact that the Florentine merchants with their boats, that was the best way to travel with merchandise. Every time they had to reach the coast, Mediterranean coast has to pass through Pisa, and obviously they were obliged to pay the taxes for the custom. So fighting each other was a great event. I showed this amazing photograph where you see the Vasari corridor, this that I mark with the laser, that it's covering the top of the Ponte Vecchio, because that is the actual image of the city. But when Jews established in Florence, the bridge already existed and was already housing a special activity, not the jewelry like today, but the butcher, the food market, butcher, grocery, and the fish market was here on the side of the bridge. And the first place where we have news of Jews established was exactly here. This is a tower that reminds us to the exact location of the former street of the Jews, right here. Why? That's we don't know, because we don't have enough documents. Because at that time, even if allowed, no Jews bought an apartment. So we only know that they rented, and we don't have registration with notary. That's very, very important to have this kind of legal document to understand history. And so, because to rent, they weren't obliged to register anything. And so we know that anyway, this street here from 1400 started to be called the Street of the Jews. And it's amazing how the story evolved. Why here? Probably maybe it was cheaper than to live on the northern side, this is the south of the city. And also one of the pawnbrokers that established in Florence, one of the first, was called da Pisa. I think, I'm not sure, but I think it was Ismaele da Pisa, because he was coming from the main Jewish family in Pisa that was called the synagogue. They arrived from Rome there, the synagogue, and then when this member of the synagogue family established in Florence were called, obviously, da Pisa. But the thing it's interesting that this is the street that changed name, and right here started to be called Via Pisana. So by road, I mean, that was the main direction to reach Pisa, and by boat this went too. So maybe it could be that an explanation. And this is fantastic painting, reproducing a painting of 1800, which is big in the city hall, and reproduce a black and white etching of late 1400. And it's fantastic, totally out of proportion for what concerns the height of the building. So we have a very slim bell campanile bell tower of the major church, the Duomo, boom, all the buildings are very, 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 very tall. But it's amazing because these, the main building, are exactly the building that you see today if you arrive. Right behind here today, this is the church of Santa Maria Novella, after which the name of the train station that is located right behind. Train station, obviously, of 1800, not 1400 yet. And the facade of the church is exactly this, because the facade was finished on late 1400. Then we go down here, where is the famous San Lorenzo Church, where all Medici are buried. And then we arrive down here, where is the Baptistery of Florence. The baptistry is the church where people, children mostly, once a year became Christian. And that is the Duomo facade that was never completely finished up to late 1800, but had few decor, etc. That is the city hall that I shown before, and that is the Santa Croce Church that had a facade only on late 1800. This is Ponte Vecchio, originally made at the mid of 1300, housing only simply the butcher, the small blocks with the butcher shop. And the Street of the Jews, that was more or less like here. And Pitti Palace, sorry, I tried to reduce this image. Voila, Pitti Palace, baby, let's say, that was later the palace that the Medici bought when they became duke at the mid of 1500. And they made here the fantastic Pitti Palace with a huge residence and a wonderful garden at the back, Bovoli Garden. And this is Santo Spirito Church. That is the city still today. Medici. Who the Medici were? First of all, the pronunciation. I usually deal with people that call it Medici. But why Medici? Medici. How do you say in English is medical, non-medical doctor. And Medici, they were known probably 200 years before becoming Florence citizens, and they were already known as a kind of nickname of the family. I mean, good, famous Medici, medical doctor. So the name is Medici. But then when they started to live in Florence, they were coming from northern Tuscany. They were known as merchants. From early 1400, they also were banker. I mean, 1437, it was the time when the grandfather of this famous man, Lorenzo de' Medici, Cosimo the Elder, was one of the great personality of the government of the city. Very smart people, very smart in politics, very great diplomat, but obviously having a lot of enemies, good friends of the King of France, Cosimo, and his son obtained to can join to the family crest the famous fleur de lis as symbol of the King of France friendship. Forever they maintain it, obviously. And that's okay, good relationship with the Jews, nothing special, but the golden era was this period, 1469 to 1492. We say the golden era of Lorenzo de' Medici. What it means, all along 1400, and not only in Florence, but we are talking about the city, with the Renaissance, there was a kind of, not really revolution, but a rising up interest from the Christian scholar to investigate the Kabbalah, to study esotericism. And this was something that the church disliked totally if there were Christian secular people. Say, why secular? The priests, the monks, yes, they study, etc. And some of them also study in the convent, in a monastery, study also, or the Dominican, study Hebrew and someone Aramaic, but that was their work also, to investigate, to study, to. But why secular? That is you have to think that the church had a kind of pyramid. The top of the Christian church, the popes and missionaries, they decided what Christians have to think. So why Christians wanted to investigate by themselves the origin of Christianism, going back to the Torah, Tanakh, whatever, something that was absolutely non-like. And it smelled as a kind of beginning of what later was called Protestantism. Christians wanted to better understand the things. And what happened? The cult of Lorenzo became absolutely very famous. Lorenzo and other people in the Este, in Ferrara, and also in Milan. In few of these enlightened people cult, they started to be more and more Jewish scholars invited to debate on the Tanakh, on the Torah, or this and that, to discuss, not to force them to convert once in a while, but to learn more, to discuss about. And Lorenzo was a very special person, that for sure. Terrible businessman, the only one in the history of the family that of the time that was catastrophic. He really wasn't able to control the money, etc. But sophisticated mind and unbelievable great diplomats. This man protected the Jews as never happened before. If I'm going to be too long, tell me, because it's a terrible vice that I have. What you see here is a fantastic representation of Lorenzo looking the young Michelangelo and making him some compliment for his skillness. Has a very young sculptor when Michelangelo met Lorenzo. Lorenzo died on 1492. So Michelangelo met him in the 89 and he was 14 years old. And it was known as a good promise. This is a fantastic representation of a group of Jews, how they were represented, sometimes with a hat with the shape of the cone, sometimes that looked like something Arabic. We're quite confused idea about that. And historically, we consider this one, Elia del Medico, one of the famous Jewish scholars that Lorenzo frequented. But the thing which is important, where is this? It's on a fresco inside the Medici chapel in the Medici Palace. Pico della Mirandola. Pico della Mirandola and Marsilio Ficino were two Christian scholars, educator of the three boys of Lorenzo. And both of them studied Hebrew. Pico, who had a fantastic memory, in 1 month learned Hebrew and in another month learned Aramaic, exactly like me. I'm kidding, obviously. And Lorenzo children, the sons, obviously they didn't have Aramaic, but they were educated in a special way. And also their cousin that was living, because it was orphan, living in the house of Lorenzo. Why I tell you this? Because between them were the two future Medici popes. And when Lorenzo died on 1492, the situation changed. I mean, here you see something. It's a map that I designed here for an itinerary. And it's published in a book that is called Jewish Florence Illustrated Itinerary that I help a lady of the community to write, studying mostly history of the street of the Jews, something more concerning the building and the evolution in urban design concerning all the history of the city. And you see, number one, And you say the same here, number 1, number 3, number 5, number 7, the location is time by time of the different synagogue in Florence. So the Street of the Jews, as it was called this originally, number 1. Then here we see something that concerns a story that happened to a young boy right after the death of Florence, a terrible story, a young boy that was lynched. And here, number 3 is where was the ghetto on 1570. Other 2 locations for synagogues, and the last, the enormous synagogue of Florence that was built here because this area was not yet built on late 1800 and became a new elegant quarter of the city, so the community bought the lot here. And this is Ponte Vecchio. Ponte Vecchio during the COVID with all the shop closed. And you can see this amazing bridge, which is one of the most impressive places that still today, every time I see, I found fascinating. Actually, here are jewelry, but now you see closed. I stopped here, exactly corresponding to the center of the square that is on the top of the bridge, to show you this image. 1945, when after the war, an impressive image of the damage caused by the by the German army that was retreating from south to north, south here, north here. They, for a military strategy, they blew up all the bridges to stop the advancing of the Anglo-American army. But the Ponte Vecchio was so famous, so impressive, etc. Hitler adored it, that they decided to save the bridge. To save the bridge, they destroy houses of 1200, 1300, beautiful building, etc. But not the bridge. So this is this area clear of all the ruin. The Street of the Jews was exactly here. And you can see that was so damaged. All the buildings where we think could have been the synagogue now don't exist anymore because they were destroyed during the time. This is 2020 when I made this photo. From here to there, all these houses correspond to the houses from here to there. And this is the Street of the Jews, actually called Via dei Ramaglianti. Again, 45, you see, this portion here corresponds to this portion of an ancient tower of 1200. Here, this facade, you can see with Eve on, and the building where maybe could have been the synagogue, because a Jewish merchant wrote home that he had on early 1500. A minyan at the synagogue, in the synagogue at the corner between the Street of the Jews, as really was called the Street of the Jews, and the main street parallel to the river, could have been here, but we don't know. Now that is how the street looks like. And here you can see the image that you can have, and this panel that tell us that somewhere here where living Jews, etc. Why it's interesting for us? Because once this group of Jews, each one having the use, the work in the different district of the city, where the different pawn shops were, they originally were 3, and then they became up to 6 every in each one. Obviously, they live close to where they work, like anybody else. But one, and it's my personal conjecture, the first one who signed the contract with the Medici, lived probably right in this street and rented the nicest apartment, large apartment, and maybe one large room of his apartment, or altogether he and other of the pawnbroker rented a special room for common prayer. But the thing which is amazing, we have contract and we understand something, but we don't understand the real life of Jews at the time. Jews were obliged to wear a yellowish symbol to be recognized, but not the pawnbroker and their employees. They were dispensed to do that. But the thing which is fantastic, if you read this written down here, 1464, what happened? Having a group of Jews, they had a good relationship with the government. What happened was that other Jews started to establish in the city, even the most strangest kind of Jews you can imagine. Here, 1464 is a contract that was signed between a Christian and a Jew to set up a school of dance in Florence. The Jews was coming from northern Italy, I think from Ferrara, from a family of dance teacher. And he had this good idea. There were so many Jews, maybe dividing men and women, but they could have the school open to everybody. And what is amazing is the name of the notary, Giovanni da Vinci, the father of Leonardo. And that's what happened. After the death of Lorenzo de' Medici, who really was excellent with the Jews, what happened? His son made a lot of political mistakes, and the Medici, for the second time in their history, with the accusation to want to create a dictator, were banished out the city. And for a long time, there was a very weak situation. There was the fascinating government of Machiavelli and friends, but Jews had a very difficult situation without the protection of the Medici. Not physical danger, but risking to be banished out as money lender and not. But finally, 1530, with the help of the Habsburg this time, no more the King of France, the Medici were, at the time of the second Medici Pope, obtained the help of the Charles V of Habsburg, also King of Spain, Netherlands, Belgium, South American territory, the most political, powerful man of Europe. And they obtained also not only to back to government the town, but also the title of Duke. And immediately after the death of Lorenzo, something happened. It happened, the arrival of the poor Sephardi. And here, on the side of a famous monument of the city, there is a statue representing the Madonna and Child, and engraved at the bottom is written that with a little piece of iron, a petit Judeus, I mean a young Jewish man, injured the image, probably the image of Jesus, and because of this, he was lynched by a group of people on 1493, so right 1 year after the death of Lorenzo. What happened was there are a lot of documents about it, but he was a young Bartolomeo de Casas was a Spanish teenager that probably started to fight with a group of Christian, teenager, and he had a little piece of iron, true of faith. This group of teenagers, maybe to bother him and put him in danger, told that he injured the image of the Madonna and other two tabernacles. So he was arrested, but the thing was very, very strange in the document that immediately self-accused. Yes, they did it. Whatever it was obviously was condemned to a final execution. But good for him, because it has been a terrible torture before being dead. People, when they got him out of the jail, lynched him. And that's the worst thing happened here. Then we have the new generation, the second Medici Duke. The first Duke was the nephew of the Pope, and the second one was this very ambitious, smart businessman who married a wonderful Spanish lady, a princess that was the daughter of the vice king of Italy, vice king of Spain in Naples, which doesn't mean vice king of Naples. It was the representative of the Catholic queen and king of Spain in southern Italy that was a kind of Spanish colony since a long time. And from Naples down to Sicily, that was Spanish land in some way. Who was invited to move to Naples, was a very famous Jewish man from Spain. Not all Jews were banished out completely in poorness, etc. Few special Jewish scholars that were well respected at the court of Ferdinando and Isabella, like Isaac Abarbanel or Abravanel, as we say in Italy, were invited to establish somewhere else, bringing some economy with them. And the Abarbanel, Isaac established his family in Naples. Then he moved all along Europe, Italy, etc., because he was invited as scholar, etc. But in Naples, the Abravanel became important people. And our future Duchess, a beautiful girl on the left, Leonor de Toledo, that married Cosimo in 1539, she was in excellent relationship with them. Cosimo already met the Spanish important representative of the King and Queen of Spain earlier when he was younger. He already understood the importance of having a new port in Tuscany, and he founded, when he became Duke, started to found the new port, Livorno, having in mind and learning much more through the wife, the importance of the Sephardim in the commerce of Mediterranean area. So what happened was that when the Pope in 1555 founded the second ghetto in Italy, in Rome, the Pope tried to convince Catholic rulers to do the same, and our Cosimo told no. But later the situation changed, and one of the reasons of the ghettos was caused by the break more and more deep between the Catholic and the Protestant. And obviously Jews could remain, but Protestant out of Rome, but forcing them to stay in a ghetto. Cosimo had to face on which side to stay in the 60s, late 60s. Cosimo decided to stay on the side of the Pope. And it started was 67, 68, I don't remember exactly the date, sorry. It started the hunting of the Talmud. Like everywhere else, the most fanatics started to do. And 1570, after having obtained the title of Grand Duke of Tuscany, decided to set up ghettos, one in Florence and one in Siena. Never Pisa or Livorno, I know business, holy business. For the ghetto was chosen a quite miserable area that was at the very city center, already existing as a packed, overbuilt section. He bought a block and did not have room to build a wall around, I did in Roma. So his architect put gates here, there, originally, and then it became a little bigger and was another gate here. And Cosimo rented only to Christian the shops and the houses facing the street and the square, and Jews had to enter through the gate, open in the morning and locked after the sunset by Christian. So they had to stay inside. They could sell and buy secondhand stuff, and so not a nice business anyway. They had a big well. This is an image of of a map of late 1500, where a ghetto already existed, as well as existed here the new food market that was taken off the bridge after the Medici started to go up and back in their corridor. And it's not a church, that is a food market. And look this column, because you will see very soon. This is a very interesting book containing a lot of maps of the ghetto. The ghetto was made a little bigger in the beginning of 1700, but the houses here were much nicer and Jews could have much better place. Very suffocating, only 2 square decent and no much air. That is a nice image of the ghetto that gives you an idea. But those were Christians, those who live all around here. So they created a Christian belt around the all. This area, all this area, together with churches, houses, nice, was totally knocked down on late 1800 for a urban design to make the city more modern. Florence was, after the unification of the country on 1861, became the second capital of the city. Sorry, I turned my telephone off. Okay. The second capital of the city. And that is when the great design, knocking here, knocking there, knocking down the city wall, etc., took place. And these are photographs of the huge, since ever, well of the ghetto, because Jews needed so much water to do anything. And this is non-existing anymore, the ghetto, but it's an alley that I often show to the clients to give them the idea of how suffocating were the small area and nice. And this is myself a few years ago, showing you a gate. This is a map of the Italian synagogue with a beautiful around built on late. The two synagogues, Italian and Spanish, already existed, but the Italian one was burned on a fire inside the ghetto, so it was rebuilt bigger. And here you see a map of late 1800, where I color in two colors, the yellowish and the pinky, the first portion of the ghetto, so 1571, when they really started to live there, and early 1700, when finally the ghetto was a little bigger. Because how many Jews? Originally 550, 100 from Florence, 500 from all the small satellite town around the city. And later they became 800, so they needed more room. But the wealthy Sephardi friends of Cosimo, obviously, never in their life wanted to enter in the ghetto. No problems. They live out of the ghetto. So it started to be a ridiculous situation, the poor indoor and the wealthy Sephardi outdoor. And here I color in red the perimeter of the actual block. Those that were built on late 1800 after the total demolition of the ghetto. And this is an amazing photo, and you can see here the facade of the ghetto on late 1900. This was the new food market, already knocked down the few market of 1500. That's still existing but somewhere else, and that was the ghetto. And here the column, which is exactly the same, you can see now. And this is the palace that was built late 1800 by one of the many Levi family of Florence. That palace cost the Levi family of Ottavio and Enrico Levi a fortune of money. They didn't calculate how much expensive it was. And so they lost all their money and they immediately had to sell it. But the funny thing is that the name Palazzo Levi remained to this construction. So Palazzo Levi is still the palace existing, overlapping the area where the ghetto was. End of the Medici dynasty. Good moment, honestly, because the last Medici Duke was not a bad man, but very, non very open mind. Let's say that on 1737, the Habsburg, a branch of the Habsburg, I mean, Marie Therese of Habsburg, the famous mother of Joseph II of the Habsburg, etc., thanking a treaty, thanking the many weddings that took place between the Medici Grand Duke and Austrian princesses, an agreement, let's say, between France, Spain, and Habsburg. Thanking God we did not have the same Spanish rule in Tuscany. The Habsburg ruled the city. And they were, between the Catholic, definitely the most open-minded ruler, and they started to give citizen rights. They immediately, almost on request of the Jewish community, sold the two synagogues of the ghetto to the Jewish community, and Jews could do almost all profession they wanted. Peter Leopold, the second great Grand Duke of Florence, he was an open mind, too modern even for his people. And on 1779, as you can read here, sold the ghetto, the section where Jews lived, to 3 Jewish men, 2 family from Florence and 1 from Livorno. And step by step, they started to live out of the ghetto. The complete emancipation arrived when Napoleon sister, and after the French Revolution, ruled Tuscany up to the fall of Napoleon on 1814. That's 100% of citizen rights. The Habsburg back after the fall of Napoleon to rule Florence after being in exile in Vienna, and they left the things as they were. But Jews and Christian could not intermarry, they could not convert Christian to Jews, whatever. There always were this section. Unification of Italy, that's brought to the complete emancipation of the Jews. And those are interesting things. This is where this poet, very famous Italian poet, because he was a Jewish poet, but he also became famous for his poems that were written also in Italian. And the Peña family, a very wealthy Sephardi family that established in Florence, and still having the shop with their name. And at that point in time, the Jewish community in Seba was looking for a lot ever. I mean, since mid of 1800, before the total emancipation, they started to be 1,500. They could not use anymore the small synagogues of the ghetto. They were too small, no way for the great holidays. So finally, what happened? They decided to buy a lot here. And what happened? It happened that they already knew that the ghetto was going to be knocked down together. All this area where I point my laser here to here, all this area was totally knocked down. And the ghetto was only this section. So they bought the lot, not very central, but still inside the city wall, and they built the synagogue. When the synagogue was finished to be built on 1882, the ghetto was not yet demolished. And what happened? The community took the two ancient synagogues of the ghetto, so the furniture, etc., as you can see, and in a building near the Duomo that was owned by the Finzi family, typical Italian Jewish name, the Brotherhood of the Material Surim, as is written on the plaque on the right, bought this building, and on the very top floor, in two large rooms, one having the window facing the street and one facing the courtyard at the back, they set up the Italian synagogue furniture of the ghetto and the Spanish Levantine one on the back. And it's amazing because what is written here, that in August, in Italy, qui nell'agosto 1944, the Florentine Jews met to thank God for the liberation. That was reminded 4 days ago, because Florence was liberated in August 1944, 11th of August 11th, when they entered the city, the partisan and the Anglo-American. The city was not completely liberated because there were lots of snipers, but it was known that they entered. Why? They could not enter the synagogue because there were damage at the synagogue. This is one of the beautiful watercolors showing us the synagogue that was staying here, having the window facing us. Then the building has been sold by the community on 1962 to build the Jewish school that you see here, because they wanted to have their own school, no more the risk that they suffer with the racial law, etc. And this is the fantastic. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable, but because the dimension is much bigger than you can even see through this photo.
Giovanna.
Oh, wow, sorry.
Hello. Giovanna. Hi.
Yes,
sorry.
I finished with 3 images, so.
Okay, great. I just want to say that we're getting to the hour where we want to take in a couple of questions. This is incredible. And actually, it's a beautiful place that you have us on. If you wanted to speak about a little bit what it would be like if people came to visit Florence now, can they get access? Can they get access to this beautiful synagogue we're seeing right now?
Absolutely, I'm telling you now. But I mean, the access is regular. There are timing to respect. It's open from 10, I mean, all the time schedule you can find easily. If you look at synagogue, Florence synagogue, you check and you enter the website of the community, you see all the timing. And it's open to public regularly from 10 to 5:30 or 6:30, depending on the synagogue, except on Friday, it's on winter time and ends at 3, and summertime ends at 5, and it's closed for Saturday, obviously for Shabbat or any holiday. Just finishing this, the Moorish style chosen for this image, the architect was Marco Credes, Jewish architect, and the great donor who gave the most of the money to build it was the man that I show you in the other photo. David Levy was the president of the community. He died bachelor, no kids, and he left enormous donation to build this unbelievable city. That is very, very Moorish, as you can see through the decor and sector. And you can see, you cannot perceive how, that is much better, to perceive the unbelievable decor, very warm, the wooden benches, all this. And women gallery on the top, and also behind the Nikita here, and the men down here. Reminding a church, oh, well, like all the new synagogue of the time, having an organ, not played anymore now, don't worry, and a rise-up platform typical of the great basilicas. And this goldish decor that I show you only as a little sample, that was a copper decor that was all over the wall, all over, unbelievable. It was shining the first year. And that is a fantastic top view. Original, the bima was up there, but 30 years ago, the rabbi of the time changed all the disposition, placing that at the center and turning all the benches around. The women gallery with wonderful fabric, and the bad time of the fascism that, you know, brought Mussolini, after having a positive attitude toward the Jews, with non-anti-Semitic at the very beginning program against them. After the link with Germany, the anti-Semitic propaganda and the application of the racial law. The Jews at the time represented the 1 per thousand of the entire population. The terrible thing, the worst, not only the racial law, but also at that time, Mussolini did not allow any physical attack against the Jews. But what happened was that when 80 years ago, the Allied entered Italy, southern Italy, at that point in time, the king supported a coup d'etat against Mussolini, imprisoned Mussolini, did everything such in a bad way that Italian army was completely defeated, and the German occupied Italy, liberated Mussolini, who became the puppet in the hands of Hitler because he was coward. Mussolini was the worst coward that ever existed, and Mussolini did everything he could to help the hunting against the Jews. That is the famous, I know very well, the son of Nathan Cassuto, rabbi of Florence, and the children were saved, but he died in Auschwitz with all the help he gave to help the Jews. This is another, the first roundup was in Florence on the Shabbat of November the 43. And time by time, they were in total in an 11 year of Nazi occupation, 11, months of Nazi occupation, the number of the people, Florentine foreigners, etc., deported from Florence and to Birkenau, Auschwitz, were 311, and only 15 came back. And some of the fascists damaged also the internal part of the synagogue, placing some bomb at the bottom of the building. This is a fantastic photo with a young soldier of the Jewish brigades. They entered Florence in 1933, and this one and another one stayed 2 years to teach Hebrew to the kids, to convince young people to make the Aliyah. And these are the kids of the kindergarten and preschool, actually. Here, if you come, you find a kosher dairy restaurant, Roots, fish, milk, etc. And Baghetto is the same owner of Baghetto in Roma. So we have a Bassari restaurant, exquisite, and a very good kosher restaurant. This is me. And right behind is a very lively quarter. We call it Sant'Ambrogio, near a church called Sant'Ambrogio. And the market inside has a kosher section, as you can see. There is also kosher bread that you can find. There is a kosher, also a kosher section in a supermarket right behind. Now I finished. Okay, so now we come back. Sorry. No. Oh, ecco. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Okay, so I'm here, and whatever you want to ask me, I'm ready.
Great. Thank you so much, Giovanna. I can speak for myself, but for everyone, that we feel like we took an incredible trip back through time and learned an incredible amount of history. And there's a couple questions that came up during your presentation that I wanted to start with. And then there's a couple questions that are people who are looking to travel and visit and wanted to have some specific questions about that. Robin had asked earlier on, is it true that the basis for the Catholic Church's anti-Semitic response was because the clergy were losing business due to charging higher interest rate compared to the Jews? I think that was something you'd mentioned very early on.
Well, I cannot enter so technically that field. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not so convinced of it because there are so many that, the clergy, Christian, not immediately, honestly, but Christian started when they started to become such a complicated hierarchy, if you want, always accused Jews of one thing, to have killed Jesus. And that was the persecution. That's a historical persecution since ever. I was a child in 1963. First time a pope after century, John the 23rd, canceled the sentence, starting any credo, I believe that it's starting any important service. So say, I believe in God and in Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and I believe in Jesus killed by the very bad Jews. Oh, you listen this all your life and you think it's not having any effect. Jews also, in Roma, people knew Jews since ever, but in the other city, people even never met Jews. And they really believed they had a horn and hunchback. They didn't even believe they were so similar to them. It's something that probably helped a lot during the war not to have such a massacre of Jews in Italy. For something else. Not only the fact that we had only in total from south to north to Milan and to the end of the war, 18 months of Nazi occupation, which it's always better than 5 years, but also something that touched the population. There were lots of simple people that helped when they really realized that people were exactly same feature. In Italy, you don't distinguish a Jewish person from a Christian one, and it's identical. Only very rare you have a very blondish, but Italian, we have blonde Italian in Northern Italy. So to have the same feature, and especially in Italy, slowly always existing Jews that enter all the field. They were artisans, they were this, they were that. Much more match to the population, especially. And then if you have, because there was locational business, it depends where, it depends when. And I don't want to be too generic in my explanation because it's not exactly my knowledge, my great knowledge.
Understood. I'll let you know, Giovanna, that we have a lot of questions, so I want to get as many as possible. Michael was wondering if the Jews participated in politics before and after the 15th century, and if you could also speak to what were those living conditions like and overall quality of life for the Jews compared to those of other religions in that time frame.
before the ghetto, let's talk about. Obviously, Jews were definitely a minor. I mean, they never had the same right. They never had the same right, and never had absolutely the same possibility in general to make a great career like the Christian. That's forget it. There were always, but it was worse here than in the Muslim country. Don't forget it, because in the Muslim country they were deemed, they were considered second level, but they were not considered someone that forcibly had to be converted. Let's say that in Italy we can't talk about Jews entering any kind of ruling up to 1800. Forget it. If they tell that someone was ruling something in 1400, 1500, what? Absolutely no. Should have been such a scandal. No way. They were definitely Jews that after the in Tuscany already since 1830 something, Jews could be represented at the city council. That is true. At the beginning, represented by a Christian, and then later also by themselves, personally. And then with the unification, absolutely yes. But before that, no, it depended. Piedmont with Torino gave the complete emancipation on 1848, and Jews could enter the army, could do whatever they wanted. The famous first prime minister of Italy, that was Camillo Cavour, had a secretary who was a very important Jewish man. But stop. Then we have, yes, especially after the unification, don't forget we had a famous, not for you, but for us, yes, Luigi Luzzatti became prime minister. I mean, more or less, almost right after the Dreyfus case in France. Not even thinkable to have in France a Jewish prime minister. Okay, here we had two Jewish prime ministers. So what made different Italy was that none, as I told at the very beginning, you did not have live in Paris 500,000 Jews. Oh, come. No, they were always proportion. Small community, a few Jews, a bigger city that were attractive to Jews. Jews in Livorno, they had an enormous power, political power, but they weren't ruling. I mean, up 1700, there were important occasions in the city, meeting a great event. There was the archbishop, then the lord mayor, and the rabbi. That's always. And in 1861, with the unification of the country, Livorno lost the right for all the citizens of the city not to work for Rosh Hashanah, not for Pesach and Yom Kippur. And the Jews protested, say, but that's, we are giving work to all the population, so what? This is not possible anymore. So yes, but they are very rare cases. Okay, in Milan, where is a Jewish community, very wealthy and important, they were not allowed Jews to live more than 3 days up to 1834. So you can, it's impossible to give you a unique.
Thank you.
Question?
Yes. So, well, two things. One, first up, would you mind terribly to turn your camera back on, if possible? I know some people were hoping to see you after hearing a beautiful presentation.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. That's lovely. And two, could you share your screen, your last slide where it has your contact info, your email address, maybe website. And then we have some more questions.
Yeah, no, just a moment. Excuse me. Just going down to this. Okay, so let me. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
If you look for, that is my name, Giovanna Bossi Rosenberg, or Jewish Florence Tours, you find me.
So maybe just leave
almost.
it up for a little bit, and our participants can take pictures or take down your information, because there's been a number of questions about your contact. And I wonder if
Thank
you
you.
a little bit about, Michael was asking, what are your recommendations for Shabbat dinners? Are there different shuls? I know you spoke a little bit about it.
Yes.
For Sephardic, for Ashkenazi. If we want to visit Florence and we want to have a Jewish experience, what are the options?
Allora, if you want to visit Florence, there are in Florence the Jewish community, which, like all Italian Jewish communities, are considered Orthodox. In the real, they are more conservative. The member of the community that are now less than 900, they are considered all strictly Orthodox. In the real, they are more conservative. But you can have Shabbat there. The synagogue is enormous, so you don't need to book a seat because you always find place, men and women, no problem. And I suggest always to send an email to the secretary of the community and just informing that you are coming, you are this person, etc. Maybe adding a photograph of your passport so they know who you are. The services are regular all Shabbat and all holidays. On Thursday morning, also there is regularly a tefillah. For Rosh Chodesh, also tefillah. There is a chief rabbi. His helper is studied to become a Hazan. There are Gabbanim, Parnasim, a secretary. It's a big community. It's 900 people made of Florence, the third community in Italy. So active. And you can ask all the information, hoping that they will respond you now, because they are a little slow in Italy. And it's also famous to house a lot of wonderful, it's a spectacular synagogues. So there are lots of weddings from all over Europe, from Israel, from all over the world, and want to have a wedding there. If you want to have a tefillah every morning, you can get in contact to, let's say, Chabad in Tuscany. But you can contact me, and I gave you the link. There is a Chabad family, very nice, very active. Finally stopped fighting everybody, Chabad and Italian Jews. Now they are all in good relationship. And the synagogue also, the synagogue, on the garden of the synagogue, it's also a mikveh, just to give you an idea. And Chabad have almost, they are much more able than the Jewish community to set up a minyan whenever people want. Then for Shabbat dinner, it's better to book one of the two restaurants, the dairy, Roots or Baghetto. Baghetto is only meat, okay, so good for Shabbat. Root on the second floor has another kitchen for meat. So on the second floor, they have, let's say, the Bassari, the meat restaurant. Okay, so Shabbat, each one of them can be organized. Obviously, it's only one person, but if they organize, they organize. If someone stay in an hotel and don't want to work and all the time, etc., they can even provide you the Shabbat food where you stay. For breakfast, if you're strict about kosher food, it's better you book one of the many places near the synagogue to stay. It's a nice area. It's not in the middle of nowhere. It's maximum walking distance of 20 minutes to the very center of the city. So it's okay. You can go wherever you want, and you can ask. It's better to be close, or if you are a little far, you can be provided even with a kosher breakfast. Not all the hotel can provide you this. And what else? Ask me something else.
Great, thank you.
I'm here.
I think it's okay to take off the screen sharing so we can see you again. I think it's been up for a while. Thank you. Stan had wanted to ask about the synagogue, the big synagogue during World War II, and if anything had happened to it.
Yes, that is the research that I have done and not yet finished in the archive of the community and in other city archives, because there are controversial opinion about it, but the document I found in the archive are document written. And so what really happened, the fact is that a week before the German blew up all the bridges of the city except Ponte Vecchio, most of German army already left. With the colonel, with the general, they left, as well as the main fascist hierarch left the city. So they were retreating to north, and they left. Who left here? The snipers. The fascist sniper, the German sniper, that were considered the worst. I mean, the German consul of Florence, who was very much helpful, he protected Jews, etc. He remained in Florence up to the very last moment. He sent his family to Switzerland to save their life and not to risk for them, but he remained in Florence, and he wrote, I mean, in a letter to other friends, I mean, we are waiting for the arrival of the German sniper, and I'm very worried because they are terrible. I mean, I'm sure, but the other one were nicer people. But anyway, so what happened was that it was the night between July 26th and 27, that what happened was that a group of men entered the synagogue and placed at the bottom of the women gallery, the colonel that supported the women gallery, dynamites, connecting all the dynamites to the starter, which was far of that area, and so a little far, not just in front of their noses. They made a big explosion. The synagogue outdoor remained intact, but they heard the sound of the explosion. They didn't back to check what really happened there. That is the strange. I mean, they didn't went back to control if it really worked, because they did not want to destroy the synagogue. Impossible to destroy the synagogue, because the enormous pilaster, they should have required an enormous quantity of explosive. So the thing which is interesting in my research was to go back to check what happened. Why? After that explosion, there was not a complete collapse of everything, of the women gallery, not of everything inside. So I found in the archive of the community a thing which is really interesting. The letter written by the secretary of the community that was obviously written, and excuse me, hidden, because I didn't want to be arrested. But he heard the sound. It was a very smart friend. So in the night, I mean, very deep, in early morning, at 2 o'clock in the morning, he entered there and he checked what happened. And then he wrote a report that I found when he wrote almost a month later, that was late August of 44, he wrote a letter to the Allied Army to ask some of the British American force to clear all the explosives he found inside the synagogue, and also especially those that were disconnected, that did not explode. And so, and he had to write, first time he wrote, there are no damage, very great, not really terrible damage to the structure, but a lot of damage, yes, because the explosion collapsed the core and this and that, some window there. They sent there, the British Army sent to South American Jewish engineer that were specialized in building bridge. So those who really work more with explosives, etc. And this I knew thanking to South American clients that sent me a book about, and so I know the name of the engineer who made it because there is a book about him. Lion Dyson, that was the name, that together with another one disconnected everything that was still active. And then the synagogue was repaired. But what I non immediately finished, a temporary iron structure to replace the column that were the most damaged. But that is the problem. Who saved the synagogue? Because someone definitely has disconnected something. So in some way, what came out also, it's the man. Son, a few years ago, there was 2016, and I met the year afterward, a man who told that his father saved the synagogue. And it's probably the truth. His father was a fascist sniper, very, very well known, Florentine, invited by the fascist authority to back to Florence. And he lived right in front of the synagogue, right in front. And he always worked for the Jewish president of the synagogue of the time, and of the community of the time, and always worked for the Jews. So it was not anti-Semitic. And whatever it's possible, I believe it's quite realistic that when he contributed with the other to place the explosive, he was too famous not to be part of the group. And according to me, were only fascists, non-German army. German soldier, yes, but none, we didn't find with a friend of mine who is an historian of War II. She studied in the German archive to find an order given by the army, because Germans are very precise. They are not like Italian. Whatever they do, they sign. No order given by the German army. So this group of people made this, but one of them disconnected something and saved the synagogue. It's true, fake? I think it's possible.
It's it's a detail that is that none of us knew about, and it's very interesting for you to share. We're actually out of time right now, but I want to say a couple of things. So many people, Giovanna, have written to us asking about, first off, an incredible presentation. Everyone loved so much the pictures and the maps, and really was done in such a thorough job. So congratulations for that. Many people wanted to know the name of the book that contains your map.
Marna, just a moment, I take one. It's easy. It's not easy to, I mean, they sell in Amazon, etc., but Amazon Italy, non-Amazon. Excuse me, just a moment. Is this one? Up. This is, I think you have to find a way.
Okay.
Up, I mean, it's reversed, so I don't know how you can see. Wait a moment.
No, if you hold it up to the screen, it's not reversed for us. So it's called Jewish Florence.
Okay. Illustrated itinerary, ASCA, with a K. And you can find online, you can buy online, it's 14 euro something. Amazon, but Amazon.it, or you can find with them. And then if you have some problem, you can call me and I will help you to get it. Great. And that is the book, full of wonderful photographs. It's really well done. I mean, I contributed. It was my book, honestly. It's a young lady of 92 years now that 2 years ago asked me to collaborate with her, because it's a very young lady. She has a memory I never had. So she remembered everything, and she was the responsible of the archive of the community. So she knows everything by heart.
So we'll remind everyone to feel free to get in touch with Giovanna if you're planning your trip, or if you would like to go visit Florence. She's obviously very willing to help plan your trip, your travels. And I believe that's all the time we have. I know there was a couple of questions that we didn't get to, but we'll happy to do so later. You're getting lots of comments, Giovanna. I know we closed the chat, so you can't see them, but everyone is saying that you did excellent research. The maps are fantastic. This was a wonderful session, a wonderful presentation. Everyone wants to go back to Florence right away. So really, thank you so much.
Well, I suggest you to come where it's not this hot.
Yes.
Better for you.
Very true.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your passion. When I start talking, I never end, so it's not a.
And there's
Thank
a
you.
Limud. That's how we know each other. Giovanna knows each other from Limud, Jewish
Yeah,
Learning
it's true.
Conference in
That
Italy,
is true. That is
in
true.
Florence this past year. Sorry,
We
We
Mara.
never had time to meet. We never meet physically, but we know each other very well.
Very true.
Ciao. Enjoy your summertime and best luck to everybody. Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
all.
passion. Ciao.